Hi, Gabby. So, this is Gabby's first walk with me.
I didn't know it then, but just 9 months later, this shy little pup would be taking me on a record-setting adventure around North America. About 4 months after I adopted Gabby the McNab, I bought her first Frisbee, and it was love at first sight. They were practically inseparable, but sometimes Gabby loved her Frisbee just a little too much.
Show everyone what you did to your Frisbee. Yeah, you destroyed it. You're a monster dog. Yeah, you're a monster dog. You're a naughty girl. Yeah. Naughty McNab. Naughty McNab.
With reinforcements in hand, I came up with a plan for Gabby to go down in the record books as one of the greatest Frisbee/disc dogs of all time.
All right, so this is the start of Gabby's grand adventure. If everything goes as planned, we will hit all 48 lower 48 states, all the provinces in Canada, and one of the territories. And hopefully Gabby will be catching a Frisbee into each one of those. Even if we don't hit them all, it's still going to be fun to try. So here goes.
The first state on our list was our home state of Washington, which would be pretty easy to knock out considering we lived there.
Frisbee? Good job, Gabby.
With Washington out of the way, we got in the car and headed east towards our next stop.
Gabby.
I just want to let you know that we are taking off on an epic adventure to somewhere cool that you have never been before. And I've done this type of journey one time before with some other puppies, and they had a spectacular time. And I think we are going to have a spectacular time together too. Okay, Gabagoo? Daddy loves you, and I can't wait to explore with you. Yeah, you're the best girlie.
Next on the agenda, Idaho. We wouldn't be in Idaho for long, so we did our first Frisbee at a rest area near Coeur d'Alene.
Good girl.
But later, we found a much more scenic spot near Lookout Pass. We then drove through the night so that we could wake up the following morning at our next state, Wyoming. As luck would have it, a recent flood had washed out the road we needed to get into Wyoming, and the temporary road didn't have a state sign for either Montana or Wyoming, which meant that we would need to drive over 100 miles out of our way just to find the state entrance signs.
Gabby. Good catch, Gabby.
With our unexpected drive through Wyoming complete, we made our way to Montana. While in Montana, Gabby and I got to visit some relatives before continuing her grand adventure. There, we hiked to picturesque Marion Lake.
Ready?
We also stopped to admire Chief Mountain.
Frisbee? Good girl.
Having finished Montana, it was time to head north.
Hey Gabby, you're about to cross into your third country. Are you excited? We're headed to Canada. It's up there.
Alberta would prove to be one of the prettiest spots of the entire trip.
What do you think, Gabby? You want to catch a Frisbee in Alberta?
Unfortunately, the gardener made sure that it was one of the loudest stops as well.
Good girl, Gabby!
The circuitous logistics of our journey meant that it was time to head west to British Columbia. While in British Columbia, Gabby and I found the world's largest tandem axle truck in Sparwood.
Oh, you're not going to run, are you? Come on, you have to catch it. Good girl! All right.
After British Columbia, we headed back south to Montana for one more fun stop before heading back north into Saskatchewan.
Gabby. Psst. Gabby. Good girl.
We then stopped in Val Marie, where we got a tour of the town and made a new friend before we headed east into Manitoba. Having spent another night in the car, we woke the next morning near the world's largest pumpkin in Roland, Manitoba.
Good girl, Gabby.
With another long day ahead of us, we headed south into North Dakota. During a brief stop in Fargo, Gabby and I were recognized by a woman who'd been following our adventures on Facebook. It was quite the coincidence. Later, we came across one of the last bonanza farms in the U.S., so naturally we had to stop for a round of Frisbee. We then hopped in the car and made our way towards Minnesota in search of a cultural icon. And sure enough, we found exactly what we were looking for, the Jolly Green Giant. As we ran around the park, I realized that we were on our fourth day of travel and that we had already visited 6 states and 4 provinces. We were making great progress. With Minnesota in the bag, we ventured into South Dakota. Gabby had already been to South Dakota once before, but she'd never caught a Frisbee there, so we had to stop and make sure that she could add it to her growing list of states and provinces. Next on the agenda would be Nebraska, where Gabby and I stopped to admire America's longest river, the Missouri.
Gabby. Good girl.
We then spent another night in the car, but this time near the border to Kansas. We spent part of the morning playing at a local park in Sabetha, before then moving on to our next state, Missouri.
Good girl.
After our morning in the park, we continued Gabby's grand adventure by entering into Missouri, where we didn't find much of an entrance sign, but that was okay. We were still able to make good use of a local reservoir near the town of Bethany.
Gabby. Your face. Come on. Gabby.
With Missouri in the books, Gabby and I turned north and set our sights on Iowa. We had a couple ideas of what to do in Iowa, both of which centered around the town of Winterset. The first being visiting one of the fabled covered bridges of Madison County.
Good girl.
The second being a visit to Hollywood legend John Wayne's boyhood home, where Gabby tried to sneak into the house, not once, but twice.
Good girl. Come on.
We then made a quick stop in Dubuque and toured the shores of the Mississippi River before crossing into Wisconsin, where Gabby had an encounter that was out of this world.
Is that a cow in a UFO?
You want to catch your Frisbee? Gabby.
Gabby was a little thrown by the cow flying the UFO, so we needed to do a second take.
Ready? Good girl.
After having our close encounter with an alien abduction, Gabby and I decided that it would be best if we stayed at my parents' house that night in Illinois. Refreshed from not having to sleep in the car, Gabby and I headed off to the highest point in the county to play some more Frisbee.
Good girl. Good girl, Gabby. Such a good puppy.
Leaving Illinois behind, Gabby traveled east to uncharted territory, Indiana.
Gabby, you want to do Frisbee?
But the Frisbee wasn't the only reason we were in Angola. Gabby was here for a playdate with Dumpster Muppet.
Hi, Six.
Six, lovingly referred to as Dumpster Muppet by his mom, is an internet dog that Gabby and I had been following on Facebook for quite some time. So when I found out that he lived in Indiana, I knew I needed to try and set up a playdate. Though Gabby was worn out from her playdate with Six, we still carried on into Ohio. In the only state without any naturally occurring lakes, Gabby and I found a nice open park to go out and enjoy. From Ohio, we ventured north along the shores of Lake Erie and into Michigan. Even though we'd both had a long day, we still found enough time to get our throw in for Michigan.
Catch your Frisbee.
We then crossed the bridge into Ontario, driving through most of the night before taking a short nap in a rest area near Toronto and happening upon this beautiful little gem the following morning. From Ontario, we were off to the land of maple syrup and poutine, Quebec. We would be spending 3 days in Quebec, as our route was set to take us at least 2,500 miles across this massive province.
Good girl, Gabby. Good girl. Good girl.
There's a whole lot of wilderness in Quebec, so Gabby took the opportunity to stick her head out the window and breathe in all the fresh air. And by wilderness, I mean remote. Quebec is home to the second longest stretch of road in North America without a gas station, at roughly 240 miles. This is not where you want to break down. Although we didn't break down, there were several massive forest fires in the area, one of which caused the road that we needed to be on to be closed. This caused us to have to reroute some 400 miles. It was not the kind of setback that we were looking for, but we still made the most of it. Coincidentally, a few hours later we found ourselves in the middle of a torrential downpour. But by then, it was too late to turn around to make any difference to the trip, as we were well on our way to our next destination, Newfoundland, Labrador. This would be the furthest north that we would make it for the trip, at a latitude of roughly 53 degrees north.
Good girl.
From Newfoundland, Labrador, we headed back south across the wilds of Quebec making our way towards New Brunswick. As the sun began to set, we found ourselves near a massive dam near Manicagouan, Quebec. A short distance later, we found a quiet, deserted road and slept for the night.
Good girl.
The next day, Gabby and I took a ferry across the St. Lawrence River before finally setting foot in New Brunswick. New Brunswick's Bay of Fundy is home to the world's largest tides, and we were lucky enough to be there at the low. This meant that in just over 6 hours, the spot where we were playing Frisbee would be under an incredible 38 feet of water. After our time in New Brunswick, Gabby and I headed east to Nova Scotia, where I had a special surprise in store for her. The following morning, I had chartered a boat to bring Gabby and I out to McNab's Island near Halifax. Since Gabby is a McNab, I thought this would be the perfect place for her to catch her Frisbee in Nova Scotia. The boat captain dropped us off and went on his way, and for a couple hours, Gabby and I were the only person and dog on McNab's Island.
Gabby, you ready to explore? You ready?
But before we went exploring, we had some business to attend to.
Good girl, Gabby.
We then set off on a short hike towards historic Fort McNab, where I had planned on holding a special ceremony for Gabby the McNab.
Gabby. Come here, you bum. Hi. Hi. Gabby. Get that fly. Get that fly. Come here. Hey. Come here. Sit. Good girl. So I just wanted to thank you for being part of this grand adventure that we're on. As of today, you will have been to every single province in Canada. And then we'll start working on all of the states that you haven't been to yet. And right now we're on your island, McNab Island. And so I thought this was the perfect place to give you a little present. You've been with me now for about 9 months. And I want to officially... Gabby, come. Come here. Gabby, come. Gabby. Gabby. Gabby, come.
But Gabby the adventure dog had plans of her own.
Gabby, come. Wait. Wait. Gabby, wait. Sit. Sit. So as I was saying, you were well on your way to becoming an adventure dog. Yeah, especially with that little maneuver you just pulled. Yeah. So, because of your adventurous spirit and how much you've already done and how much more you're going to do in your life, I'm officially welcoming you to the Pedals for Paws team, Gabby. You are officially a team member. I love you, little girl. I love you, Gabby. Congratulations.
We left McNab's Island in Nova Scotia with Gabby as the newest member of the Pedals for Paws team. We then had just one province to go, Prince Edward Island. To get there, you have to cross the world's longest bridge over ice-covered waters at a distance of roughly 8 miles. Plus, when you get to the island, you have to pay a $50 toll. It would be an expensive stop, but Gabby was worth it. Prince Edward Island had one of the prettier entrance signs that we had seen. And then, the moment of truth.
Gabby. Good grab, Gabby.
Just like that, Gabby became the first dog ever to catch a Frisbee in all 10 provinces of Canada. There was no time to celebrate, though, as we had our next state in our sights, Maine. Back in the U.S., Gabby and I found a giant blueberry to welcome us home. Our next state, however, would prove to be much more difficult, New Hampshire. Gabby and I made our way to the windiest place on the planet, Mount Washington. It was here that a world record 231-mile-an-hour wind gust was recorded, and we were going to try to play Frisbee here in a windstorm.
You ready to try this, Gabby? You ready? Let's do it.
With sustained winds of 45 miles an hour or higher and gusts in the 60-mile-an-hour plus range, it was going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to make this happen. The winds were so strong they were knocking the camera around, so I tried throwing the Frisbee from just a couple inches away from Gabby's face, but she was having none of it. We were going to have to walk away defeated. As we walked back to the car, I had an idea. The Summit Visitor Center had a small protected entranceway that was large enough for both Gabby and I to fit in. It was worth a shot.
Try it again? Yeah. Good job. Ready?
Though not the prettiest spot or the most spectacular catches, they would have to do. Gabby and I then came off the mountain and drove to what would be one of the most emotional stops of the trip in Vermont.
You're a good girl, Gabby.
Dog Mountain is set on 150 acres and is considered a unique national treasure which honors the healing power of dogs. The grounds themselves include the dog chapel, and they are always open to both people and dogs, as dogs aren't just welcome here, but they're cherished. About 7 years earlier, I'd visited Dog Mountain with my then dogs, Dogzilla and Captain Fantastic. I knew that after they had both passed, I wanted to return to Dog Mountain to spread some of their ashes, and sadly, today was going to be that day. The chapel itself is filled with tens of thousands of notes and photographs honoring the lost dogs of the world. I too left behind a message for my dogs as well, before spreading their ashes outside. Overwhelmed by the moment, I didn't notice that Gabby had brought her Frisbee inside, as if she were leaving behind a toy in the memory of Dogzilla and Captain Fantastic. It's impossible to walk through the chapel without getting a little emotional, especially knowing that I'd previously been here with two of my best friends, and that they were both now gone. If it hadn't been for Gabby, I don't know how I would have gotten through the day. When we got back outside, Gabby made a new friend, Honey Boy.
Oh, God. No, don't drink that one.
Seeing the dogs splashing around in the mud carefree reminded me exactly why dogs are so special. This moment of pure dog levity was exactly what I needed to get me refocused on our trip. Racing south, we had time for one more state for the day, Massachusetts. It's not every day that you get to play Frisbee next to a tank, so Gabby and I definitely had to stop and take advantage.
Nice.
After visiting Massachusetts, the next state on our agenda was New York. Gabby and I spent the night catching up with a couple of friends before then heading over to New York's Central Park the next day.
Gabby. Who's my crazy dog? Who's my crazy dog? Good job. Good job.
For us, playing Frisbee in Central Park is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, so we definitely took some time and enjoyed the moment.
Good girl. Good job, Gabby.
Leaving the Big Apple behind, Gabby and I crossed the border over to Connecticut. We spent several hours exploring Connecticut's countryside before settling on this idyllic spot to play some Frisbee. It was then time to go and visit the nation's smallest state, Rhode Island. Though it was the last of our New England states, Rhode Island still had a certain charm that made it well worth stopping by and visiting. Leaving Rhode Island, we set our sights on the only state where it's illegal to pump your own gas, New Jersey. And what do you do when you can't pump gas? Play Frisbee, of course.
You missed it. Gabby. Whoa, you're missing it. Come here. Gabby. Gabby.
Gabby was a little too distracted by all the lights, cars, people, and smells, but it's still been fun to try.
Good. Yeah.
To play it safe, we headed back to the state sign just to make sure she got her catch in clean.
Good girl. Good girl, Gabby.
Gabby and I slept at a gas station for a few hours before getting up at 3 a.m. to head to Pennsylvania and knock something off of our bucket list. The Rocky Stairs.
Gabby, you ready?
Let's go.
We'd gone with such an early start because temperatures for the day were supposed to be in the mid to upper 90s, so we knew it was going to be a long and difficult day. Having completed Pennsylvania, we scurried back to the car and made way towards the first state, Delaware. We'd hoped to let Gabby catch a Frisbee in front of President Biden's personal home, but the Secret Service didn't seem very keen on this, so we settled for the old state house instead. Moving on from the tiny state of Delaware, Gabby and I made our way into Maryland. Temperatures in Maryland were rising fast, so Gabby and I stopped as quickly as we could at the first interesting thing we could find, this cool old mercantile. After she caught her Frisbee, we then rushed over for a fun stop at my uncle's house for lunch. We couldn't stay too long though, since we still had a lot of stops to make for the day, and the next one was going to be a big one, Washington, D.C. I thought about teaching Gabby how a bill becomes a law, but she didn't seem very interested, so we just settled on some Frisbee time in front of the Washington Monument instead. After playing Frisbee in the near 100-degree heat of Washington, D.C., Gabby and I headed to the countryside of Virginia. While in Virginia, Gabby visited the site of the First Battle of Kernstown, where General Stonewall Jackson began his Civil War campaign through the Shenandoah Valley. There was also time for a quick dinner with family before getting back in the car once more. Gabby and I soon found ourselves where the Civil War unofficially started, West Virginia. John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, is viewed as a point of no return, which ultimately led to the Civil War. But Gabby didn't want a history lesson. She just wanted her Frisbee. With 29 states in the books, Gabby and I drove through most of the night before sleeping near our next state, Kentucky. We felt justified in getting ourselves an early morning start, as we would be treating ourselves to our first hotel room of the trip that night. Gabby and I continued south into Tennessee via the Cumberland Gap, which was made famous by frontiersman Daniel Boone. This mountain pass made western Tennessee and Kentucky accessible to the early settlers, but today, Gabby and I used it as the path to bring us to a late breakfast at my aunt and uncle's house in Tennessee. After our short visit, Gabby and I climbed high into the Great Smoky Mountains before crossing the newfound gap into North Carolina. With less than 20 states to go, this was the first time that I felt like Gabby and I might actually achieve our goal of her catching a Frisbee in all 48 continental states and every province in Canada. We made it to South Carolina in the middle of a rainstorm, but Gabby wouldn't let that deter her from becoming the first dog to catch a Frisbee in every state in the continental U.S. Wet and weary, Gabby and I spent a well-deserved night in a hotel in Georgia. In 2017, Dogzilla visited Georgia and proceeded to have the world's largest case of the zoomies in this field. Today, Gabby and I would return to that field so that she could experience the fun and so we could also spread some of Zilla's ashes.
Catch Frisbee. Daddy? Good girl. Good girl.
Though an emotional stop, it was one of the highlights of the trip. Gabby and I continued pushing west and crossed the border into Sweet Home, Alabama. Gabby and I had a quick lunch with a friend before getting down to business with the Frisbee.
Good girl.
Then it was time for our final push south into Florida. In Florida, we found a deserted white sand beach just in time for the final Frisbee toss of the day. From there, we had some serious miles to make before spending the night along the side of the road in Mississippi. The following morning, we rose with the sun, found a cannon, and crossed the Mississippi River. It was an eventful start to the day. West of the Mississippi, we found ourselves in Louisiana, where we had one of the more unique stops of the trip. Without even asking, Gabby and I somehow managed to get permission to film inside of the Shreveport Waterworks Museum. After Louisiana, our next stop was Arkansas. I didn't know where we were going to stop and film, but something always tends to pop up. Without having planned it, We happened upon a small town named McNab, and I knew this was exactly where we needed to film. We carried on, with the temperatures climbing into the upper 90s, so as we got to Oklahoma, I had to find a spot for Gabby where she could cool off.
Good girl.
Escaping the hot sun, Gabby and I got back into the air-conditioned car and headed to Texas. Unfortunately, there was a major accident that closed part of the interstate, and we lost a couple hours rerouting near Dallas. So we used the opportunity to let Gabby meet a couple of Texas dogs at a local park. The next day, we took advantage of the cool morning sun for Gabby to catch her Texas Frisbee.
Good girl.
Our next date was going to be a challenge, as temperatures across New Mexico were well over 100 degrees, and Gabby didn't want anything to do with her Frisbee. But finally, near the northwest corner of the state, we hit a small rain cloud that dropped temperatures into the mid-80s for a few minutes, so we took advantage of the brief respite and played some Frisbee. Being in Four Corners country, we quickly arrived at our next state, Colorado. We'd only be in the state for about 20 minutes, but we still found somewhere cool to stop, Chimney Rock.
Good girl.
We then hustled over to our next Four Corners state, Arizona. Taking advantage of the golden hour light, we found not one, but two places for Gabby to catch her Frisbee in Arizona.
Good girl.
In the last few moments of daylight, we made it to our final Four Corners state, Utah. During their lives, Captain Fantastic and Dogzilla had a chance to explore a magical place called Little Wild Horse Canyon. Today, it was going to be Gabby's turn.
Can I catch the Frisbee? Good girl. Good girl.
With only 3 states left for the trip, Gabby and I made our way into Nevada, where she got a little too excited to catch her Frisbee. No worse for the wear, Gabby then had a chance to play with a McNab named Paisley. With just 2 states left, Gabby and I were California dreamin'. In 2010, I found a stray dog in a parking lot in California. It took 4 days to lure her into the car, and I wound up keeping her and naming her Captain Fantastic. I decided there would be no better way to honor her than to have Gabby catch her California Frisbee in that same parking lot.
Girl.
Incredibly, we were down to our final state of the trip, Oregon. In 2009, I adopted a dog named Tucker from a shelter in Oregon. Quickly renaming him Dogzilla, we were inseparable for nearly 15 years. I found it fitting that Gabby would be catching her record-setting Frisbee in the exact same kennel where I'd met Dogzilla 14 years earlier. We then headed up to Crater Lake to watch the sunset and reflect on Gabby's record-setting accomplishment, catching a Frisbee in all 48 continental states in the U.S. and all 10 provinces in Canada. The next morning, I had a little surprise in store for Gabby.
Does he smell familiar?
Gabby hadn't seen her littermate Dash in nearly a year.
Yeah, you don't know what to think, huh? Oh, it's time for Slappy.
Gabby and Dash picked up right where I assumed they'd left off, without missing a beat. Gabby then also got to meet Dash's new sister, Una, and an unrelated pup named Stan the McNab. It was the perfect way to celebrate all of Gabby's achievements on her grand adventure. As Gabby and I started the long drive home, we happened upon the last Blockbuster video in the entire world. This got me to thinking. Maybe all good things don't have to come to an end.
Gabby. Good girl. First try.
Maybe Gabby's adventures with her Frisbee weren't over just yet.